The painting by Domenico Veneziano in this gallery shows St. John, who's the patron saint of Florence, whose feast on the 24th of June is the most important event that happens in Florence in the Renaissance and still today. It's much celebrated. And therefore, there was a great deal of attention paid to the figure of St. John in Florentine art, what he looked like, who he was, what he meant to Florentines. One of the great accomplishments, I would say, of Domenico Veneziano was that he made St. John, in this case, a young man, a Florentine golden youth. He based his depiction of this young man on an ancient prototype. There was so much interest in ancient art at that time. He made what you might call an ancient sculpture of a Hercules or something into a flesh and blood Florentine boy or adolescent, going off with great determination into the wilderness. This painting, which shows this extremely rocky, almost surrealistic landscape, is obviously the invention of Domenico Veneziano, but it also relates, I believe, to the work of other painters in Florence at that time who were looking at landscapes in similar abstract way, and particularly artists like Paolo Uccello. This particular painting is a predella of an altarpiece. The predella of an altarpiece is the lower part of the altarpiece. Predella means actually step, in which frequently in 15th century altarpieces there are showing narratives or stories of the various saints. This one is St. John the Baptist. This altarpiece, which was broken up in the 18th century, came from a small church in Florence called Santa Lucia. And the main panel went to the Galleria degli Uffizi. In the main panel, you'll see the Madonna with various saints. Among these saints is St. John the Baptist, and this painting would have been shown directly below the St. John the Baptist in the altarpiece. The other painting that the National Gallery of Art has here, which shows the stigmatization of St. Francis, would have been showing directly below the image of St. Francis of Assisi. So each one of the narratives relates to the saint portrayed in the main panel. Once the altarpiece was dispersed, literally cut up, these were all once on the same panel, the predella, it was cut by a carpenter and it was sold and scattered. Each one of the pieces had their own different histories. This painting belonged to Bernard and Mary Berenson, and it was at their house called the Villa Tatti in Settignano in the hills outside of Florence. In 1919, Carl Hamilton, who was a collector from New York, who was very interested in early Italian paintings, which the Berensons were major connoisseurs in helping provide American collectors with paintings of this nature, came to visit Villa Tatti. At that point, Bernard was away, but Mary Berenson was there and struck up a very nice friendship with Carl Hamilton and gave it to him as a gift, saying specifically that it was by another artist, not Fra Angelico, to whom it had been attributed when Bernard Berenson found it in Florence, but by Pessalino, another painter from the mid-15th century in Florence. This painting and the other painting, which comes from the same predella showing the stigmatization of St. Francis of Assisi, come from the Samuel H. Kress collection. They were donated to the National Gallery of Art from that collection. This particular one, showing St. John the Baptist in the desert, was sold by Carl Hamilton in 1942 to the Kress collection, at that point as Domenico Veneziano. There was great interest in the 1920s in particular about the artistic figure of Domenico Veneziano. Exactly what were the paintings that this master produced. He was sometimes thought to have come from Venice because his name's Domenico Veneziano, but he's largely active in Florence in Italy. But there are very, very few works of art by him. They're extremely rare, in fact. National Gallery of Art is very lucky to have not only this predella, the other one I've mentioned, but also the Virgin and Child, which is hanging next to it in this very same gallery. National Gallery of Art probably has more paintings by Domenico Veneziano than any other gallery or museum in the world. When one comes into this gallery, one's attracted by these very large paintings, such as a Tondo by Fra Angelico, showing the Adoration of the Magi, the Annunciation by Masolino. These are very large paintings which came from grand private settings, such as the Palazzo Medici for the Fra Angelico, or a church altarpiece for the Masolino. The Domenico Veneziano was also a painting for a church, and it's small, but I would argue that despite its diminutive size, that's actually a very monumental picture. Blowing up, it could be a fresco painting on a mural in the Florentine church as well.